Okay, everybody, good evening. We're going to continue with what we began last week, namely trying to understand Vizos HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei B'nei Yisrael Al Pi Hashem Biyad Moshe. We're going to try to understand a little bit more about what that means. And of course, it's within the context of this last piece of Matan Torah, this last piece of Mishpatim, that according to Rashi describes something that happened earlier, and according to the Ramban, something that happened later. We're on page 440.
We haven't moved much.
440. We don't move. We don't move horizontally. We move vertically. We drill down. So
vertical has two directions.
Yes, correct. Okay. So we mentioned last week that there were two opinions as to how Torah was given. The Gemara Maseches Gittin. One opinion says that the Torah was given Megillos, and the second opinion is that the Torah was given all at once. So let's first of all try to understand, what does it mean when we say the Torah was given? What is this Torah that we're referring to? Whether it was written Megillos means it was written in scrolls. It was written piecemeal. Okay, that's one approach. A second approach is that it was written all at one time. According to the approach that it was written piecemeal, basically it says that the first part from Bereshit until Matan Torah was written when Moshe came down from Har Sinai. Then, as events transpired, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would tell Moshe, okay, write this down. And what would happen? Moshe is now beginning his collection of scrolls. And at the end of the 40 years in the desert, Moshe Rabbeinu has in his tent this huge collection of scrolls that he now puts all together. He sews them together, puts them all together, and that comprises the Torah. And then he makes copies of this, and he gives copies to the tribes, all of the tribes, and a copy, the original, which is put into the Aron Kodesh. Okay. According to the opinion that says the Torah was given all at once, what does that mean? According to that opinion that the Torah was given all at once, the Torah and in the last year of their journey in the desert, God said to Moshe, okay, write down the following, starting from Bereshit through Le'enei Kol Yisrael at the end of the Torah, or based on an opinion we wrote, until the last 8 psukim of the Torah. But in other words, it was all written down at one time. So the first opinion says it was written down in stages. The second opinion says it was written down all at one time. Now, obviously, it is possible to say that according to either opinion, Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to know in advance what was going to happen. And that makes a lot of sense, because how could Moshe Rabbeinu have known in advance what the Meraglim were going to say and sent them? It doesn't make any sense, right? To know that we were going to have to wander in the desert for 40 years, why would Moshe Rabbeinu have even sent the Meraglim if he knew that was going to happen? If he knew the request of Bnei Yisrael for meat was going to wind up killing so many, why would he have brought that to God? All kinds of questions. So we have to assume, and this is assumed pretty much across the board, that Moshe did not have advanced knowledge of what was going to happen.
It's the difference
Right?
between the knowledge of what was going to happen and the knowledge of the laws that God gave. They might have given them the laws on Har Sinai.
Okay, let's just back up for a second before we go there. Now, so we have these two opinions. Torah was given Megillos, so the Torah was given all at one time. Okay? Both opinions embracing the fact that Moshe did not have foreknowledge of what was going to happen. According to both of these opinions, what is Torah? When we say Torah was given Megillos, or Torah was given all at once, what is Torah?
So is Torah the narrative?
I'm asking, what is Torah? Tell me what you...
Is Torah the narrative plus halachos, plus mishpatim, or is Torah just the mishpatim, or is Torah
Okay.
and Torah Shabbat
Okay.
about that?
This book is Torah.
Right.
Okay? Bereshit, Shmot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim. We'll make it easy. That is Torah. Exactly what's written here, that is exactly what God told Moshe Rabbeinu to write down. Might there be some variations? Perhaps in spelling, we mentioned last week the difference between Ashkenazim and Sephardim in one particular word, right? And we also mentioned some words are written Malay in some versions, they're written Chaser in other versions. So yes, there might be minor changes like that, but basically these words that we have are the words that Hashem spoke to Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, write down, V'el Moshe Amar, Ale El Hashem Atav. In other words, this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was to write down. When was he told to write that down? So again, if we go by Megillos, the opinion is that he was told to write that down after the event happened. If we go by the opinion that says he got the Torah all at once, he was told to write it down at the end of the travel of the Jews in the desert.
I thought that during the 40 years, the Jewish people were able to study the Torah, right? And what were they doing for 40 years?
Wait a second.
So they
Okay,
didn't have
hold.
the Torah until the end.
So let's just hold on a second, okay? So what is this idea? Let's try to understand. Moshe wrote whatever, either it was written down periodically throughout the Midbar, in which case that was what was studied,
Yeah.
or it was written down at the end of their time in the Midbar, in which case what was studied was the Torah that was given orally to the Jewish people. Not Torah Sheba'al Peh. Not Torah Sheba'al Peh. Basically the following. Something happened. God communicated to Moshe, this is what I want you to take out of this event that happened. Moshe, or orally, or however God communicates it, right? God did not say to Moshe, write this down. God said, this is how I'm communicating this incident to you. Moshe taught that to the Jewish people. Maybe there were laws in there that Moshe taught to the Jewish people. Whatever it was, Moshe took that oral instruction that God gave him, taught it to the Jewish people. But it wasn't written down. At the end of their time in the Midbar, God said, okay, now write it down. So they had what to study because Moshe Rabbeinu was told by God what to teach the Jewish people. This could even have been dictated at that point by God to Moshe, but without Moshe writing it down. And in the Midbar at the end, God said, okay, now write this down. The same thing that he told him as it unfolded in the Midbar, now write this down. Okay? Human beings could not do this. Because something that happened yesterday, I have a problem describing it today. Certainly, I won't be able to tell you what happened tomorrow. That, we have the frailties of memory and distraction and all of those things. Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have those things. So Kadosh Baruch Hu can tell Moshe Rabbeinu on year 3 something, and in year 40 tell Moshe Rabbeinu the exact identical thing. So according to the opinion that what Bnei Yisrael got was the Torah all at once, It doesn't mean they didn't have anything in their time in the Midbar, right? They did have things in their time in the Midbar, but it wasn't written down.
Except for the Ten Commandments. Ten Commandments were written down.
So now my question is, why?
Except for the Luchos.
Why,
The Luchos contain the 10 Commandments.
why the necessity for the lookup? If the Torah is given in its entirety, and you have the Ten Commandments within why that?
Well,
That separate entity?
so I think we could answer it just the other way around. In other words, all of the mitzvos of the Torah are subcategories of the Aseres HaDibros. That you can fit all of the mitzvos of the Torah into the structure, the framework of the 10
So
Commandments.
those are like topical headings.
So Bnei Yisrael got those, and from those studied all of the mitzvos. Now, does that mean that there were kids sitting in a cheder tent in the midbar, and the teacher was saying, V'el Moshe, and to Moshe, Amar Hashem, God said, right? Ale, go up. That's one of my grandchildren learns Chumash that way.
Really?
Right? The Rebbe said exactly like that, exactly in that sing. Actually, more than one of my grandchildren learned Chumash that way. Exactly in that sing song, right? Vayomer Hashem said, El Avraham, to Avraham, Lech Lecha, go for you. Just like that. So are we to assume now that there was a cheder tent in the midbar, and that's how they were taught? I don't think so.
We did say that Moshe taught laws to Aaron, and then he taught to Aaron and his sons, and then he taught to Aaron and his sons in the Chacham.
Teaching the laws, teaching the content, teaching what's here doesn't necessarily mean that Bnei Yisrael learned these exact words as their study of Torah. Doesn't mean they learned these exact words as their study of Torah. Ultimately, they had these exact words. According to one opinion, they had these exact words at intervals throughout their time in the desert. According to the other opinion, they had these exact words at the end of their time in the Midbar. But when they crossed into Eretz Yisrael, there is no question that they had these exact words.
Because they were written up on the stones.
Right, I'm talking about for themselves. That was for everybody, right? But for themselves, there is no question that each Shevet had a copy of these exact words. And what we're using today is an exact copy with the minor variations that we've spoken about, which is a sheer unto itself, the variations in the Mesorah process, but an exact copy of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar. Now, obviously, let's just to focus back on the chronology, right? Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim, Pesach time. They traveled to Har Sinai, Shavuos time, 49 days later. They were at Har Sinai for how long? 120 days, right? They were at Har Sinai for 120 days, 3 40-day periods until Yom Kippur.
That's right.
Until Yom Kippur, and then they stayed at Har Sinai from Yom Kippur through the end of the year, the beginnings of when did they start to journey? After that Yom Kippur, right? So
Well, it's not like 3 days and God complained. He says he ran out. He said,
well, once they were told to leave, they bolted out of Har Sinai. Correct.
Well, 1 minute. The template of Yom Kippur is when Moshe goes up and asks for forgiveness of the name Israel from the Egel. Hashem Sharachim Chanan Erfachayim Rav Chesed. Is that the second time he went up?
No, that was a completely that's right. So just remember what's going on, okay? Moshe Rabbeinu goes up for 40 days. What he got, we're going to talk about, right? Goes up for 40 days. At the end of those 40 days, the Chet HaEgel
Right.
comes down, smashes the luchos, punishes the people, then goes back up to secure forgiveness. That's where he's taught Hashem Kel Rachu B'Chad. Gets the forgiveness, then goes back up a third time to get the Torah again. To get the Torah again. Why he had to go back a third time, which would be the second time he got the Torah, we're going to try and talk about that a little bit. But what we need to do is figure out what was Moshe Rabbeinu doing for 40 days on top of Har Sinai. Well, we know what he wasn't doing.
He wasn't eating.
He wasn't drinking, he wasn't sleeping. He wasn't attending to any bodily functions during those 40 days. Our tradition says during those 40 days, he was a quasi-malach.
We're talking about which 40 days, not the 40 days he prayed.
The first 40 days. Now, here's the question. What was he doing up there those 40 days? Right? He was up on Har Sinai. What was he doing those 40 days? What was he learning?
Everything.
Torah Shabbat.
Okay. So exactly what he was learning, in other words, was he learned, like, did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give him a set of art scroll Chumashim? Did he give him an iPad with the digital edition of the Gemara on it? Clearly not, right? What did Moshe learn on Har Sinai? First of all, he learned this written Torah, which was not written. Right? For Moshe Rabbeinu at that time, the written Torah wasn't written.
It was dictated. He learned it.
According to the opinion that says that what was written down was from Bereshis through Matan Torah, so that was given to him on top of Har Sinai, and he wrote that down. He wrote that down. But then there are a lot of other things that Bnei Israel needed to know, and those things we refer to as Torah Sheba'al Peh.
Yeah.
Okay, Torah Sheba'al Peh. What does that mean? It means something like this. Moshe Rabbeinu taught Bnei Israel that there is a mitzvah known as tefillin. Okay, we have it in Shema, the mitzvah of tefillin. Where does it say in the Torah that the tefillin have to be black?
No place.
No place. Where does it say in the Torah that the tefillin have to be square? No place. Where does it say in the Torah that the tefillin should be worn? It says, V'hayula totafos bein einecha. They should be as totafos, which is a frontlet, whatever that means, bein einecha. If I were to ask you, where is bein einecha, what would you tell me? Right here. That's your nose is bein einecha. And it's true, there are some people who like to wear their tefillin close to their nose, but that's incorrect. Where are we supposed to wear our tefillin? Up here, right? Bein einecha, right, between this plane, but up here, not right here. How do we know that?
And they're not behind.
How do we know these things? How do we know that if you're a righty, the tefillin should be worn on your left hand? If you're a lefty, the tefillin should be worn on your right hand? Torah doesn't tell us any of these things. How do we know them? Torah, halacha l'Moshe misinai. Meaning that God taught Moshe about tefillin and said, that you're going to write down the following, but now I'm going to teach you all the details that you're not going to write down. You're nevertheless going to teach them to Bnei Israel. So when Moshe Rabbeinu taught tefillin to Bnei Israel, he said, this is what the Torah says. And then he said, and this is how God explained that to me. That's Torah Sheba'al Peh.
That's the first time or the third time?
The first time.
First time. So he got two Torah. He got the Torah Sheba'al.
Torah Shebichsav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Now, how much did Moshe Rabbeinu get? So let me share some of the thoughts with you. Okay, how much did Moshe Rabbeinu get? So we read as follows. Okay, the mitzvah of Shemitah. What parsha of the Torah is the mitzvah of Shemitah given? Parshas Bahar. Okay. If you look, just jump up ahead to Parshas Bahar. Page 696. 696, the Torah says, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Bahar Sinai Lemor. 696, God spoke to Moshe Bahar Sinai, on Har Sinai, Lemor, saying, now we get the laws of Shemitah. Daber el Bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem ki savo el haaretz asher ani nosei lachem v'shavsa haaretz Shabbos l'Hashem. The land has to rest in the 7th year. Sheish shanim tizra sadecha, 6 years you sow the field. V'sheish shanim tizmor kamecha, and 6 years you plant in the vineyard. V'asavta es tevuasa, and you're free to gather whatever those fields and vineyards produce. Uvashana hashvi'is Shabbos Shabboson yiyeh la'aretz. On the 7th year, Shemitah. You're not allowed to plant, you're not allowed to tend, you're not allowed to fertilize, you're not allowed to do anything that moves forward the production of crops. So here's the question, the very first Rashi. What does Rashi say? Very famous Rashi. Ma inyan Shemitah eitzel Har Sinai. How do we understand that? What does that mean? Ma inyan Shemitah eitzel Har Sinai. What's the connection between Har Sinai and Shemitah? Where was this given? Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe b'Har Sinai lemor. Right? God gave the laws of Shemitah where? On Har Sinai. Guess what? Everything was given on Har Sinai. So why are we being told here that Shemitah was given on Har Sinai? By the way, this is a popular Hebrew expression that people who are not religious use, which goes to, it's in Israel, it just goes to show the greatness, right, of the Jewish people. Here is something out of Rashi, right? Something from the Medrash, and secular Israelis use it as a common expression, basically meaning, what is that? Like we say, what's that have to do with the price of tea in China? Right? I don't know where did that expression come from?
So what do they say?
They say, Ma inyan Shemitah eitzel Har Sinai. What's the connection between Shemitah and Har Sinai? That's what they say.
They picked up this phrase for everyday life.
Correct. That's correct. Someone will have to look up the price of tea in China. Okay. No. So you want to say what Rashi answers?
Yes.
Go ahead. Well, first of all, let's see what Rashi answers. Okay. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, "Ela mashmita ne'emru klaloseha upratoseha v'digdukeha misinai." Just like if we continue on with this paragraph, we see the particular details of the laws of Shemitah, and they are given in their specificity. So too, says Rashi, all of the laws, af kulan ne'emru klaloseha v'digdukeha misinai. What does he say? All of the laws that were given on Har Sinai were given with the same specificity as the laws of Shemitah.
The Shemitah was given with all the specifications, with any other mitzvahs given with so many specifications?
Yes. Every mitzvah that was given with all of its specifications. For instance, Shabbos, right?
Big topic.
Did HaKadosh Baruch Hu just say to Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Sheishes Yamim, Tavod, Uvashvi, whatever? Obviously not. Right? Obviously, Moshe Rabbeinu was told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu what constitutes malacha, right? How are we going to define malacha? How do we define av malacha? How do we define tolda? How do all of these things, how does one observe Shabbos? All of these things were taught by Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Otherwise, how would we know them? How would we know them? Not only that, but let's say the laws of Shechita. Are the laws of Shechita given anywhere in the Torah? No, the laws of Shemitah do not, Shechita, I'm sorry. The laws of Shechita do not appear. And how do you kill an animal? How do you slaughter an animal properly? Has to be through the neck, and it has to be in a particular spot, and it has to be in a particular way, right? And the knife has to be this way. And how do we learn all of those things? None of it is written in the Torah. None of it. How do we learn them? Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. God taught these laws to Moshe when Moshe was on top of Har Sinai. Klaloseha, prateha, v'digdukeha.
Can I give my answer?
Go ahead.
Because I think it'll have
Go ahead.
more influence on this. And that is that these things, this Shemitah and especially Yovel, wouldn't happen for at least 50 years or more. Actually 64 years till Yovel. And yet God gave it on Har Sinai at that time to show that that the things were all planned in advance, even though they wouldn't have any practicality for many years.
Well, you're explaining why particularly God gave the laws of Shemitah, right? Why were these laws given on Har Sinai? Right. No, Rashi's not asking why Rashi is not asking why these laws of Har Sinai were given on why these laws of Shemitah were given on Har Sinai. Rashi acknowledges they were given on Har Sinai. And Rashi says all the laws were given on Har Sinai. Why is this law singled out? So you want to say this law is singled out to teach that God knew what was going to be, and God planned for what was going to be, and God had laws now for what was going to be 60, 70, 100 years in the future. Okay.
If you're trying to confuse me, you're managing very well.
I was worried that I wouldn't be able to.
Because
Okay.
you're talking about our pair, and then you're going to something which is written here. And you're going from one to the other, from one to the other.
Okay.
So I'm kind of confused.
Let me try. Okay, so let me try and clarify it. Okay, I'll try. I'll back up and just try to clarify it, unless somebody wants to help me out here. Okay, so the idea is that there were certain, according to one opinion, according to the opinion of, I think it's Rabbi Yehuda, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? Hold on a second. I will tell you in just a second. According to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, the Torah was given Megillos. So that means one of two things. It means, you know what, let's say it means one thing right now. What does that mean? When an event happened, God, after the event was over, God said to Moshe, write these words. Not Moshe, write down what happened from your perspective, but write down what I'm telling you to write down. My perspective on what happened. Moshe wrote it down, put it in the pile with the other scrolls. Next thing happened, God said, Moshe Rabbeinu, write this down. Moshe wrote it down, put it with the scrolls. At the end of their journey in the desert, Moshe Rabbeinu has this huge pile of scrolls that he now sews together chronologically to create the Torah. It was given already. It was written down already. It's just put together at the end of their time in the desert. Clear? That works? Okay. That's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Reish Lakish takes a different opinion. Reish Lakish says, nope. What happened was that when things occurred in the desert, or let's put it this way, Reish Lakish's opinion was nothing was written down until the very end of their stay in the desert. Things happened. Bnei Israel traveled. They lived for 40 years in the desert. Lots of things happened to them over those 40 years. Nothing was written down. At the end of those 40 years, God said to Moshe, okay, start writing. And Moshe Rabbeinu wrote everything exactly as God told him how to write it. The end result is no different whether you hold by Rabbi Yochanan or Reish Lakish. The end result is the written Torah. The written Torah is the Chumash. That's the written Torah. That's what was written down in the desert. So far, so good? Okay. I'll try harder. Now, in addition to that which was written down, Moshe Rabbeinu learned the explanations of what was written down. Moshe Rabbeinu learned the details of what was written down, even if those details were not written down, and they usually weren't. That was the example I gave of tefillin. Tefillin, the obligation to put on tefillin is written down. But the details of how one fulfills that obligation is not written down. God taught that to Moshe Rabbeinu.
That's where I'm getting confused, because it's not written down, but then you're going to Shemitah, which is written down. So you're comparing something that is written down to that side which is not written down.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. Okay,
That's what
so in order to answer your question, we'd have to say as follows: Shemitah. Tell me if this helps. Shemitah was written down in its specificity in order to teach us that not all the laws were written in their specificity, but all the laws were taught in their specificity. Shemitah happened to have been written down in its specificity because you needed one to serve as the example. So just like Shemitah was taught in its specificity as it's written down, so too all the laws were taught in their specificity. Shabbos was taught in its specificity. Not all of the specifics were written down clearly, but Shabbos was taught to Moshe in its specificity. Does that mean that Moshe came down to Bnei Israel and said, you may not use the Shabbos switch on Shabbos? Did Moshe Rabbeinu come down and say to Bnei Israel, if you open your refrigerator, if you're going to use your refrigerators on Shabbos, make sure you turn the light bulb on? Obviously not. Moshe Rabbeinu did not say anything close to that. Moshe Rabbeinu might have introduced principles upon which that is based, but Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say anything like that, anything at all to that effect. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. What I'm struggling with is why was something written down and some were not? What
Would have been a very heavy Torah.
there seems to be no logic to it. Why?
So the answer to the question is not much besides Shemitah was written down with its specificity. Not much was written down with its specificity. Because we need, okay. So maybe your question is, why wasn't everything written
Yes,
down?
that is my question.
Okay. In other words, why is there a Torah Shebechsav and a Torah Sheba'al Peh? Why was there not simply one Torah Shebechsav?
Because they don't want the non-Jews to have it.
Hold on a second. So Tina's answer is it would have been very heavy, right? It would have been very heavy. Okay.
But even to make the question more striking, it was prohibited from writing down the oral Torah until a.
Okay, but Leslie's question is why? Why was it prohibited? Why wasn't there just one Torah that was written down? It would have been heavy. Okay, so you would have had 5 people carry it. I mean,
Because it could not address every conceivable issue that did not exist at that particular moment that might develop over the course of.
Okay,
Well,
hold on to
when
that.
you
Hold,
write something
wait a second,
down,
wait.
it's
Hold
possible.
on to that. What were you saying?
Non-Jews were not supposed to know the Torah.
Okay.
Question, what's it?
He said the non-Jews were not supposed to know the Torah. Okay, now you have to be referring to the Torah Shabbat Peh, to the oral tradition. Why? Because the written tradition was actually written down in 70 languages, so specifically for the non-Jews to know it, right? So it couldn't have been that the non-Jews were prohibited from learning what the Torah said. They were prohibited from getting the oral tradition. So what does that mean? That goes to the question of why was there an oral tradition? Why was there a Torah Shabbat?
There's another answer that's totally secular, but it really parallels this.
I didn't give any answers yet, but go ahead.
Socrates, who was the foundational stone of Western history, was totally oral.
Homer was oral too.
I'm sorry?
Homer also. The Iliad, the Odyssey.
But basically, and specifically Socrates, and he specifically said, I don't want this written down because these things are dialogue and there has to be discussion. And it is detrimental to passing forward the knowledge, to write it down and to give it the appearance that it's definitive, because it really requires a give and take between the participants. And only afterwards, Plato specifically said this is too important not to write down, kind of like writing down the
Torah Shabbat. I mean, I think that this is the beginning of the answer to that question. That once you have only one written Torah and nothing else, then it's as if to say everything would need to be encapsulated in this written tradition, and it would become stagnant. It would become stale. It would become, what did you use? Ossified. That's a good word, right? Right? It would be, that's what would happen to it. So there was an oral tradition that was used to amplify that which was written down here. The oral tradition was just as important as the written tradition, because without the oral tradition, you could not observe the written tradition. You couldn't observe what the Torah says without an oral tradition. And the oral tradition was not written down to maintain the flexibility is not the word I'm looking for, but the elasticity. The elasticity of this Torah. This is a living, breathing Torah. The words don't change, but the ideas, the Torah Sheba'al Peh component of it, grows and changes based on circumstances, society. If we think the Torah doesn't change based on society, we do not have a sense of Jewish history, because clearly the Torah has changed very much over our history based on society. For instance, right, most of us these days have one wife at a time, right? One wife at a time. And sometimes even have difficulties with that, right? In those days, right? Multiple wives, right? Multiple wives. The Torah doesn't say anywhere you can only have one wife. And yet today it's prohibited to have more than one wife. So clearly things have changed. Not only that, but there are scientific discoveries that change the way we understand the world from the way it was in the Midbar to now, right? How do we account for those things? In other words, electricity. When was electricity discovered? When? 1880, okay. Give or take, I don't know, right? Somewhere around there, right? So imagine 1880, right? You know, they discover electricity, and what does Jewish law say about electricity?
Yeah, figure out what it's like.
Right? In other words, this is all part of the continuing growth of the body of Torah. But we're light years ahead of where we want to be.
Isn't this really how the whole reform movement started?
The conservative and the reform have an issue, right, with the Torah Sheba'al Peh more than with the Torah Sheba'al Peh.
Okay, so I want to, having given you, have I succeeded in unconfusing you a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's back up now and understand at the end of the journey of Bnei Israel in the Midbar, they have this written Torah. Everybody has the same written Torah. They have this oral explanation of the Torah, which is called Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's not called Mishnah. It's not called Gemara. It's not called Brisa. It's not called responsa literature. It's not called anything. It's called Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition, Torah Sheba'al Peh. They go into Eretz Yisrael. For 14 years, they fight, conquer the land, and divide the land up and start to settle into the land of Israel. During that time, they're studying. What are they studying? They're studying the written tradition, that written Torah, Torah Shebechsav, and they're studying the Torah Sheba'al Peh,
On how to apply all
right?
this.
On how to apply these things to life. What do they mean? But in addition to that, we now have other things happening. We have Nevi'im, we have prophets who are coming along and prophesying, right? We have later on Ksuvim, right? Did Moshe Rabbeinu know what was going to be written down in the book of Ruth?
Well, some people say that he wrote some of the books.
Did Moshe Rabbeinu know what was going to happen in the days of Mordechai and Esther? Did God teach Moshe Rabbeinu Megillas Ruth?
He took them out to heaven and he told them these will be the leaders of each generation. He thought would be the leaders of each generation.
Let me share the following with you.
Shoftim is part of the Tanakh.
The Amar Rebbe Chia bar Amma Abba Rebbe Yochanan. My dichsiv. What's the meaning of this pasuk? It's a pasuk in Devarim. Ba'alehem kechol hadvarim asher diber Hashem imachem bahar. Milamed. This is the Gemara. Milamed sheheruhu HaKadosh Baruch Hu lemoshe digduke Torah v'digduke sofrim. Uma shehasofrim asidin lechadesh. Umay nihu mikra Megillah. The Gemara in Maseches Megillah says that Moshe Rabbeinu was taught by HaKadosh Baruch Hu the story of the Megillah. What was going to happen? What was going to be written down? Moshe Rabbeinu was taught that. Now, did Moshe Rabbeinu teach that to the Jewish people?
No.
Clearly not. Because if Moshe Rabbeinu had taught that to the Jewish people, we're back to where we started with the Jewish people would have known the future. They would have known what was going to happen. In the days of Mordechai and Esther, they never would have done what they did if they had known, if this had been taught down through the generations. Moshe Rabbeinu was taught what it was, but clearly it wasn't transmitted to Bnei Yisrael.
So it's into a Kohelet and Mishlei.
According to this Gemara, Moshe Rabbeinu was taught all of that. Moshe Rabbeinu was taught Nevi'im, Ksuvim. He was taught the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh that would ultimately wind up in a condensed version being the Mishnah and being the Gemara. What does that mean? It means whatever someone was going to come up with thousands of years after Har Sinai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught that to Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay.
Isn't there a story where
What was the point? He's gonna die. Well, that's,
Ah.
and nobody else would know.
Great question. Okay. Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu do that? Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu share with Moshe Rabbeinu these things that were not going to be transmitted to the people? And right, nobody claims that Megillas Esther is Min Hashemayim. Right?
It's clear that it's not.
Nobody says Megillas Esther is Min Hashemayim. It might have a kedusha to it, but nobody says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told the Chachamim what to write down. Megillas Esther.
In the Tanakh, in Torah, Nevi'im is a little less.
Okay, so let's go back to Leslie's question. Why?
The Chira issue, first of all. Because Moshe learns it by way of prophecy, but people all along the way in the future have to make.
No, so that's why Moshe didn't teach it to the people. Leslie's asking, why did Hashem teach it to Moshe? Right? You understand why Moshe didn't teach it to the people. Would have deprived them of their free choice, right? But why, if that was...
It would have given them the opportunity to make better choices.
What?
It would have given them the opportunity to make better
That's not how
choices.
human beings work.
But they wouldn't have the free choice if you taught it to them. They wouldn't have the free
Well, that's true of anything. But we're programmed in a certain way, but we have genes that teach
Like
us.
free choice is one of the basic elemental
No, I
constitutional.
understand that.
So once you tell everybody what to do.
Or you tell everybody what not to do,
Yes,
that's what's going to happen. You tell everybody what not to do, then you've taken away their free choice.
or why do we have laws then? It takes away free choice.
You have a free choice to observe the laws or not observe the laws.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't stop at a red light, that's fine. If you get caught, you get a ticket. If there's another car coming, you could get killed, but you have free choice not to stop at a red light if you don't want to. So Bnei Israel always had free choice to violate, but what Mike is saying is that if Bnei Israel knew that if we did this, right, something is going to happen, so then it's no longer,
No, I understand.
okay. But let's go back to Leslie's question. I don't want to lose track of it, right? Mike explains why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't teach that to Bnei Israel. But why did God teach it to Moshe Rabbeinu?
Moshe's in the cleft and he asks God, show me your,
Wait for their time.
and then he says,
Right to the.
yeah.
It's gonna come back.
Maybe it's,
What?
It's gonna come back.
maybe it's the same reason that there's a malach that teaches somebody the whole Torah in utero. And just the same way that it becomes part of his gestalt, so it's easy to learn it. So Moshe represented the Jewish people, that if everything was taught to him, it's part of our heritage. It's easy.
I don't know that Moshe Rabbeinu represented the Jewish people from that
Maybe it was the
perspective.
relationship that he had.
So I'm gonna share with you the following answer. Okay. So it's a phenomenon, I believe, of the relationship, the closeness, the love, the relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu. Now we know that the relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu was unlike any other relationship. Moshe Rabbeinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to each other peh el peh, whatever that means, right? Panim el panim, no intermediaries, no dreams, no vision, panim el panim, whatever that means, okay? Clearly, no one else in our history, previously or
Since.
will ever be on that level of intimacy, of closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, okay? What happens when you love a person that much?
You share everything.
Right? Correct. So my understanding of it is that this was an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love and closeness to Moshe Rabbeinu, even though it was being taught in a way that would never become relevant for Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu knowing Megillas Esther was irrelevant to him. Right? He was not going to be around. Right? And he was not going to transmit that to anybody. So of what practical purpose was Moshe Rabbeinu's being taught Megillas Esther? No practical purpose. Hold on. No practical purpose. It was there to indicate that this is what God treasured. This is what God considered valuable. And with someone to whom I am so close, I want to share what I consider to be precious and valuable. I think that's
Are there other opinions
other opinions as to
besides the one that you suggested?
as to why Hashem taught all these things to Moshe Rabbeinu. I am unaware
There's
of.
a contradiction. I know just a midrash, but there's a storyline where Moshe's sitting in Rabbi Akiva's class because he's asking to see what the future has in store for Jewish people or something along those lines. And he's sitting in the class listening in, and he doesn't understand anything that Rabbi Akiva's talking about because he's analyzing the crowns and the words. And
Halacha Moshe
so
Messiah.
it's totally conflicted with that.
No, not necessarily.
But Moshe didn't know
Right.
that. As Moshe said, how come you didn't pick him to give the Torah to the Jewish people? So obviously Moshe didn't know everything.
Well, I mean, are you suggesting that Rabbi Akiva knew things that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know?
It's possible.
Possible.
It must have been personally satisfying to Moshe because here he was questioning, we learned a couple of pages ago, here he was questioning whether the Bnei Yisrael would be faithful to the laws when they go inherit Israel. So what happened at the end of Megillas Esther? You have a rededication of the people to the foundations of Torah. So Moshe was Navi enough to see that there would be these tribulations, the fact that they Israel come back
But he learned that. He learned
and
that.
are accepted repeatedly should be satisfying.
To Moshe Rabbeinu. give him chizuk.
on the person, yeah.
But
Okay.
to see that both temples were destroyed, Echa, all those things. So that would be devastating to him.
He was questioning the durability of the people to adhere.
He was also showing the leaders of each generation, at least as measures to that effect.
Your question is probably better than any answer that I have, but it's valuable for us to. I want to share with you. One last idea here, and this is from a medrash in Shmos Rabbah. The medrash says as follows: Kol mem yom she'asa Moshe lemala. The entire 40 days that Moshe was on Har Sinai, haya lomed Torah v'shocheach. What was Moshe Rabbeinu doing?
Forgot.
He would learn and then he would forget. Right? He would learn Torah and then he would forget. It was a lot of Torah. Amar lo, Moshe Rabbeinu said to God, Ribon ha'olam, master of the world, yesh li mem yom ve'eni yodea davar. He said, I've been up here for 40 days and I don't know a blessed thing. Right? You taught me and I forgot everything. Ma'asa Kadosh Baruch Hu, what did the Kadosh Baruch Hu do? Mishihishli mem yom, at the end of 40 days, Nasan lo Kadosh Baruch Hu es haTorah matana. What did God do? He gave it to Moshe Rabbeinu as a matana, as a gift. In other words, God gave Moshe Rabbeinu the ability to understand the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, from a human perspective, would learn and forget. He would, God gave him that ability, right? God gave him the Torah as a matana, as a gift.
This is what they say that everybody who studies Torah. They say that what you put in is the effort, but what you learn is because God gave you a gift.
Right. Okay, I think we'll leave the building with that. No class next week because of Thanksgiving, and we'll see you the week after.
I heard that you talked about pet, and I just think about
Because what?
Yes.
A dialogue between who?
Between Moshe and between